John Sutton is a former police officer, having served in the force both in the UK and Australia. In 2002, John was one of the lawyers appointed to the Seizure Task Force in Victoria, which was established to investigate criminal elements within Victoria's police drug squad. John is now one of Australia's leading criminal lawyers and a director and principal of J. Sutton Associates. Welcome, John.
G'day, Michael. Thanks for having me.
Now, today I want to talk to you about Darko. We recently seen him hit the media. A gentleman that was jailed 30 years ago.
He got a sentence 30 years ago in the Grafton jail for some drug offences, that's right.
And the offences, by today's standard, were fairly minor?
Well, it's hard to tell. It really is, because the media is only reporting that he was charged with 2 counts of cultivation of a prohibited plant, which has got to be cannabis. And it's certainly feasible, and I can't say likely because I don't know anything more about it, but it's certainly feasible. If this was a personal use type situation, he probably would not have got any jail time at all. And I'm just reminded, I was in court just very few years ago when an old magistrate, now retired, was talking to a person who was charged with possession, and was saying even possession of a small amount of cannabis in the 70s would have drawn a period of imprisonment. So extrapolating that out, I just wonder, I've got nothing more than my wonderment, whether or not poor old Darko would even have received a prison sentence by today's standards.
Now, poor old Darko, as we're referring to him, escaped from Grafton prison and managed to hide fairly well in the community of a coastal town, and for 29 years lived the model life. No government benefits, no support, and managed to work. That's correct, isn't it?
That is. Well, again, I'm reading what I do in the papers, but not only does he appear to have been able to lead a model life, as you say, and keep below the radar and not be a sponge on the community in any way, but it seems that the local community in the northern beaches of Sydney, where he was, have actually raised something like $14,000, according to the media, to put towards his legal fees. So it would seem that not only has he behaved in a way that we would like all citizens to behave in, that is, that we go to work, we do our thing, we keep our heads down, we don't get into trouble, but he seems to have even developed a better persona than that, because strangers seem to be donating money to help him with his legal fees. So he's gone beyond what can be expected of an ordinary citizen, it would seem.
And the thing that's led him to hand himself in to the police, so he wasn't caught, he wasn't uncovered, there was no failure of his ruse to deceive, was he actually lost his job because of COVID and ended up homeless. That's also correct, isn't it, John?
It is. Well, again, as far as I read the media reports, and that in itself is a whole nother line of discussion we're going to have about the tragedy that is COVID and the community consequences that it's having. But yes, that would all feed in, one would think, to the considerations of any parole board decision about the escape issue or any sentencing concerns of a court who are dealing with the actual escape, because you've effectively got 2 issues. One is the criminal offence of escaping, and then there is dealing with the non-service of the sentence that he had already been sentenced to.
Now, on my reading of the media, Darko's motivation to escape from custody was he was fearful of being deported back to Croatia, and at that stage there was the war raging there, and thought he would be persecuted as well. Will that play into the judge's considerations around this?
You'd think it would have to. Presumably there's some evidence of his either religious or political persuasions that would put him at risk of some kind of persecution. But I mean, to be quite frank, and let's take religion and politics out of it, no sensible person would ever want to be deported to a war zone. You don't have to be Einstein to work out it's a dangerous place, and consequences could be quite drastic. So I don't know he needs to go too deeply into that, but that'll be matter for his lawyers, whoever's dealing with it. But it seems to me to be something a judge or a magistrate could take judicial notice of. Again, central war zone is not something an ordinary person would volunteer for.
Now, John, I'm going to ask you to put your legal hat on and give me some advice here. If I was Darko, What would your approach be with taking this back to the court? Because he's currently in custody awaiting trial for the escape custody. What would your approach be? What would your presentation to the magistrate be here?
Hard to really answer that, but I'll do my best because I don't know the facts of the actual matter. But certainly the issues that you would be highlighting to any judicial officer is the fact that specific deterrence being a feature of rehabilitation, being a feature of sentencing, one of the many heads, specific deterrence has dissipated. I mean, to the point of just forget about it, really, if I can be blunt, because he's proven that he's rehabilitated himself because he hasn't come to notice of police in 29, 30 years. He has managed to lead a life where he hasn't been dependent upon the organs of the social services of our society. So he's been a contributor, in other words. And he voluntarily handed himself in circumstances where, having evaded the police for the last 29, 30 years, one would think he could have kept that going, but for COVID and losing employment. And in that respect, there is a principle in New South Wales called Ellis, which is effectively where someone brings an offence to the attention of authorities where they ordinarily wouldn't otherwise discover it. That then there's a lot of work to be done in around that issue of him coming forward and presenting himself, so the authorities didn't have to do what they probably should have done, which is look a bit harder in the past. So there's those factors. And then, as you've just raised, that issue about why, what was the motivation? When anyone goes to court, if I can step out of this as a specific example, I say this to every client, there's 3 questions that need to be answered, whether you're there for a parking ticket or murder. It's what happened, why did it happen, why will it not happen again? So the what happened is escape from custody. I mean, there's no question about that. The why did it happen, the concern about the war in Croatia and the consequences from that, and the why never again, well, that's probably a difficult one to answer because I think he should spend a small amount of time, because there's another principle from specific deterrence to general deterrence that needs to be factored in, which we can discuss if you want. But in terms of the underlying offence, which was drug related, it's not happened in the last 30 years. So there's a lot of, if we think about the bank of good credit, there's a lot of credit in that bank that he serves to or seeks to withdraw and persuade the court that this is his good credit, this is what he's doing, and this is what he's done, and this is why he doesn't think he'll ever get in trouble again. So there's a lot of really, really good, solid material there. But the one thing he can't get past is that the offence he has committed is one that goes to the heart of the justice system. And every court is going to take that seriously. So justice offences, we're talking about perverting the course of justice, swearing false witness, contempt of court, and escaping custody, they're all at the heart of the system. If you don't play by the rules in court and you don't abide by the rules of any sentence that's passed, then you're attacking the very fabric, no matter what the reasons are, the very fabric of the justice system. And because of that, I think Darko is going to be very hard pressed to find a judicial officer who doesn't think he has to serve some period of time. And it's questionable whether he has to serve his original sentence in full. He probably does, although there may be some esoteric legal abilities to question that. I'm just thinking if some smart and very clever senior counsel can come up with an argument to challenge the original decision by looking at modern standards of what a sentence might flow today, because of some recent changes in New South Wales or proposed changes indeed, that seek to update particular sentences, and they're usually around, or the purpose of that more recent consideration is around sexual assault type legislation that many years ago wasn't punished as harshly as it is today. So, there may be some interesting construction of an argument to say, well, that was the penalty you received in the 70s, in the 30 years ago, it'll be the 90s. We are here today in the 2020s. And if we're going to apply the type of revisitation to sentencing for sex matters, do we do it with drug matters? And if we do, this is a perfect matter to do it with. I haven't thought this through completely, but I do think there is an ability there to twist and turn and see if something can't be done, especially in a particular circumstance like this, where this man has behaved himself for so long.
Yeah, if ever a magistrate was going to sleep easy on assigning a community corrections order to an offender, this would seem to be one that would be a no-brainer as well, wouldn't it, John?
Well, I don't know. I don't know a community corrections order would, and I can't remember the definition from my years in Victoria, but in New South Wales we have intensive corrections orders, which are prison sentences served in the community. I could see a way around, I can see an argument that could be justified being made. Whether it would be accepted is a different story, and of course one for a magistrate or a judge who deal with the matter. All
right, John, I'm going to jump off this fascinating topic that it's just enthralled me, and just going to throw a curly one at you. The current riots in Victoria, any legal opinion on those at the moment?
You might note I'm biting my tongue. Look, hand on heart or declaration, I'm fully vaccinated.
Same.
I believe that there is a social contract that each of us have within our society, and that is primarily that we won't put others at risk. And the behaviour and the moronic behaviour of the people who I'm seeing running through the streets of Victoria behaving like self-indulgent, pompous, arrogant, self-interested, insert expletives. It just beggars belief. These individuals who think their personal freedom is one that can put others at risk is just so stupid, in my view. This is my opinion. It is stupid. If they don't want to have a vaccine, then our constitution, our laws say we can't make it mandatory. But if you're not willing to live in society, then you don't benefit from society. Darwin had a theory. And if those idiots don't want to have the vaccination, then don't have it. But don't expect to mix and bring your germs and the potential dangers that exist into the workplace with others. I can tell you now, if you come to my firm, you have to have had through the doors of my firm, at least one injection. If you're an employee, you have to be fully vaccinated. I insist on people producing their vaccine certificates that we can all easily download through the Medicare Express app. So I'm very firmly in that camp. Now, that said, I will defend a person's right legally to not have that vaccine, because that is my job. Okay? Doesn't mean I believe in it, but there again, I don't believe in sex crimes and I don't believe in drug crimes either. But I will defend people's rights and I will defend them to the letter of the law. But they are bloody stupid. And that is my view. And to go and desecrate the shrine of remembrance is absolutely abhorrent, and they should be humiliated and embarrassed, and they should be shunned by their friends and family, and they should learn some respect for those who actually put themselves out for others and went to war to defend others. All we're asking these idiots to do is to have an injection. Take the bloody vaccine and grow up. If you don't, then you live with that risk. But don't expect to go into restaurants or pubs or or other places where you're going to mix with people and cause difficulties with their health, because it is not right. The other side of the coin, though, is, and I really feel quite strongly about this as a former police officer, and I've said this on this program to other people in the past, the Victoria Police behaviour also is excessive. We've had the same sort of things in New South Wales, but the New South Wales Police have been a lot smarter, and I don't say that very often, in the way they've managed the situation. But I was horrified yesterday when I saw the news where there's a copper running around with what looked like a multicoloured assault rifle, pointing it at the citizens. Now, I don't know if that rifle had real ammunition in it or paint pellets or what, but it looked awful. I thought we'd moved to the US. I thought, we're having some kind of United States police import, and the garb and the clothing and their mannerisms and their behaviours. I mean, the video we saw the other day of the police knocking over an elderly lady and spraying her in the face with mace. I mean, do the police not understand that their behaviour is going to breed behaviour? We say all the time, don't smack a child, because giving violence breeds violence. Think smarter, Vic Police. Think smarter. Don't just be a paramilitary force. The uniform down there is reminiscent, in my view, of Mussolini's fascist black shirts. It's an awful uniform. People, there is nothing inviting about seeing a Victorian policeman and going and wanting to ask for directions. They look like a paramilitary force. New South Wales is bad, I think, in the uniform sense, but Victoria with the black shirts is so much worse, so much worse. Have a look in London. I mean, they still wear their blue tunics, their white shirts, and their pith helmet. They're inviting. The uniform is inviting. And I can tell you, I was a policeman over there in the 80s. And when I came here, it was so much rougher in London, so much rougher, so much more dangerous. And yet we would actually walk out on our own with a piece of wood about 30 centimetres long. That was the only weapon you had. Otherwise, you dealt with your tongue, or you got on the radio and you asked for help. So there's a lot to learn. Yeah.
Community policing.
Policing by the people, with the consent of the people, for the people. And what we see now, and Victoria's not alone in this, please, I've run this criticism against New South Wales Police. What we see now is policing against the people. We had the Commissioner up here in New South Wales saying that he was prepared to allow police officers to take liberties or be excessive, and he'd support them. And, I'm dealing with a matter just now from our Freedom March, where I got a fact sheet that said my client did one thing. I challenged something about that. I got another fact sheet then that said my client went from just resisting arrest by waving his arms around to waving his arms, kicking, punching, screaming, yelling pedophiles. And then I got a statement from the police officer, so jurat it, saying I'm willing to take the statement to court and I'll be prosecuted if I told lies. And then I got the video. The video showed no resistance whatsoever. What the video showed was this police officer ran straight at my client, hammered him into the ground, and then a melee of police jumped on top of him. Mm-hmm. And so the police are about to withdraw all of those charges tomorrow morning at court. I'll be very surprised if I don't get instructions to sue the police. I'll be very surprised if I don't get instructions to file a formal complaint, because that is a police officer who has blatantly been less than honest. I won't use any pejorative terms too much, because I think something will happen in this matter. So, Victoria Police not alone. I don't think I'm just hammering them. WA, I've got stories about. New South Wales, I've got stories about. Queensland, I've got stories about. They exist everywhere. All the time, police are humans. Someone's going to take liberties. But down there in Victoria, I think for different reasons, I won't say both sides are as bad as the other, but I would say one side doesn't help the other.
Yeah, neither excuses the other.
Certainly not.
All right, John, thanks so much for your time. Great way to finish. John Sutton on The Informer. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael.